Have you ever felt this burning desire, this obsession for a body, for a presence? There is a force within you that the world calls lust, a force capable of consuming you entirely, of silencing reason and eclipsing everything else. But this force is not your enemy. It is a message, written in a sacred language you have simply forgotten. We are talking about this desire that slides towards obsession, this single thought that colonizes your mind, making you feel both incredibly alive and tragically empty. It is a power that promises the most intense connection, but which often isolates you in the secret of your own inner struggle. A hunger that, even when satisfied, never seems to be quenched and leaves you more alone and more hungry than before. If you recognize this experience, if you have ever felt your own will escape you in the face of this devouring urge, know that your feeling is deeply significant. You are simply attuned to a frequency of the soul that many others ignore. The brilliant psychologist and explorer of the soul, Jung, saw in these inner storms not pathologies to be eradicated, but extraordinarily intelligent signals from our unconscious. For him, a symptom as powerful as obsessive lust is a call from the soul to stop desperately searching outside for what we cruelly lack within, and to begin the greatest and most courageous of journeys, that of reconciliation with oneself. What if I told you that this hunger, this devouring lust, has very little to do with the person you believe you desire? And what if it were actually the elegant and tragic mask of a much deeper hunger, a spiritual hunger? Lust is a surface experience, the powerful wave you see, but it is moved by the invisible and deep currents of your soul. It is a desperate attempt by your inner being to fill a void, not with another body, but with the connection, validation, and meaning you so cruelly lack. It is a symbolic language, a symptom which, far from being a weakness, is actually a guide calling you to look deeper within yourself. Imagine a man who has been walking in the desert for days. He is on the verge of exhaustion, his throat is dry, he is suffering from a deadly thirst. Suddenly, on the horizon, he sees a shimmering oasis, clear and fresh water. He gathers his last strength and runs towards it, obsessed with this image. Lust is this mirage. Your soul does not die of thirst for flesh. It dies of thirst for meaning. The person you desire becomes the embodiment of everything you believe you have lost: vitality, joy, fullness, recognition. You do not desire this individual for who they are, but for the promise of relief they represent. It is a desperate projection of your own need to be saved from your inner desert. You are not running towards a person. You are fleeing the deafening silence of your own emptiness. This hunger is also a flight from yourself. When daily life is tinged with existential boredom, a dull emotional pain you dare not name, or a solitude so poignant it becomes physical, lust acts as a powerful anesthetic. It is a perfect drug that your psyche self-administers. Obsession focuses all your energy on a single point: a face, a body, an interaction. And during this time, the clamor of your anxious thoughts goes silent. The pain fades. The emptiness seems to be filled. It is a temporary escape, a brief moment of respite where you no longer have to confront your own unbearable inner state. But like any drug, the effect is fleeting. Once the euphoria passes, the emptiness not only returns, it is more gaping than before, and the hunger, even more insatiable. This emptiness, it does not come from nowhere. It is often the result of a triple disconnection. Firstly, a disconnection from your own body. You ignore it. You push it to its limits. You treat it as an object to achieve a goal, instead of inhabiting it and listening to its whispers. Secondly, a disconnection from your purpose, from your life's mission. Without a clear direction, without a why that drives you, the soul floats, drifts without anchor in the ocean of existence. And finally, the most crucial disconnection. That from your emotions. You have learned to suppress sadness, to stifle anger, to rationalize fear. So, your soul, in an act of pure desperation, grabs the only megaphone it has left to make itself heard. Carnal desire. Lust is the cry of your soul that screams, "I am here! I am alive! Feel something, anything, but for pity's sake, feel." And when this cry resounds, it seeks only one thing externally: vitality. When your inner source is dried up, you become a fire seeker. Your own hearth is extinguished, cold, filled with ashes. You then scan the horizon, looking for the slightest spark in someone else, not to warm yourself by their fire in a mutual sharing, but in the desperate hope of stealing an ember to rekindle your own. This person you ardently desire seems overflowing with life, energy, light. It is this vital force that you covet. Lust is then not a quest for pleasure, but an emergency energy transfusion. It is an attempt to appropriate the vitality of another to survive, an unconscious strategy that ultimately leaves you even more exhausted and further away from your own inner source of life. Now, we must ask ourselves, where does this emptiness come from? To understand it, you must have the courage to descend into the cellars of our psyche, where we hide everything we dare not look in the face. The great psychologist Carl Jung gave a name to this inner space: the shadow. Imagine a dark cellar deep within your being. Throughout your life, every time you have felt a part of yourself to be unacceptable, shameful, or unworthy, you have thrown it into this cellar. Your vulnerability, your need to be loved, your anger, your insecurities, your deepest fears, everything is locked away there. The shadow is not evil in itself. It is simply the sum of all the parts of you that you have rejected to be accepted, to survive. But what we ignore does not disappear. On the contrary, what is locked away in the darkness seeks only one thing: to return to the light. Sooner or later, what is in the cellar will start knocking on the door. Lust, in its most compulsive and painful form, is precisely that. It is the shadow knocking on the door. It is the shadow in full action. The parts of you that feel unloved and unworthy are desperately seeking to be seen and validated. Since they cannot do it directly, they use a bypass strategy. They project themselves onto another person. Suddenly, this individual becomes the screen onto which your shadow projects its own film. The intense desire you feel is not simply attraction. It is the energy of all these repressed parts crying out to be recognized. The intensity of your obsession is often directly proportional to the depth of the rejection you have inflicted upon yourself. The deeper you feel unworthy, the more consuming the desire for the one who seems worthy to you will be. And this manifestation of the shadow takes forms much broader than mere sexuality. Observe your compulsive behaviors. The act of sending a message and staring at your phone, heart pounding, waiting for a response that will validate you. This is not a conversation. It is a plea. You are not asking for news. You are asking, "Tell me I exist. Tell me I have value." The act of endlessly scrolling through someone's social media, analyzing every photo, every like, every comment. This is not interest. It is obsessive surveillance to feed the lack. Replaying a conversation in your head where you felt desired, this is not a pleasant memory. It is an attempt to relive a dose of validation. These are all manifestations of the same dynamic. Desperate attempts to feed the hungry shadow with scraps of attention. The tragedy of this strategy is that it is a total illusion of connection. In reality, it is its opposite. In these moments, you are not in relation with the other person. You are in relation with your own lack. The other is no longer a complex and nuanced human being. They become an object, a symbol, a potential source to soothe your inner void. This is why these behaviors never satiate. It's like trying to quench your thirst by drinking salt water. In the moment, the liquid seems capable of hydrating you, but it only deepens your dehydration. Every crumb of attention gained only further deepens the shadow's hunger, trapping you in a cycle of compulsion, hope, and disappointment, leaving you increasingly alone with your own emptiness. This cry of the shadow is not just a chaotic noise. If you listen even more attentively, you will realize it is a coded message. For analytical psychology, a symptom as powerful as obsessive lust is never an error or a pathology. It is a spiritual signal. Your psyche is not trying to torture you. It is desperately trying to draw your attention to a deep imbalance, to an essential part of you that is dying from neglect. The more intense the symptom, the more urgent the message. And what is this message? Often, particularly in men, this message concerns the most vital and most misunderstood part of his psyche. What Carl Jung called the anima. The anima is the man's inner feminine principle. It is not a question of gender, but of energy, a psychic function. The anima is the gateway to your inner world. It is she who gives you your capacity to feel authentic emotions, your intuition, your creativity, your faculty to create connection and surrender to the unknown. She is the artist's muse, the priestess of your soul, she who holds the keys to your own inner kingdom. Without a healthy and integrated anima, a man can be functional on the outside, but he is dead inside. The problem is that in our culture, this part is often wounded, repressed, ridiculed. Boys are taught not to cry, to be strong, to prioritize logic over feeling, action over introspection. The anima is then relegated to the unconscious. She becomes a wounded and neglected figure. Man then cuts himself off from his own capacity to love without needing control, to feel without analyzing, to simply be present. No longer finding this energy within himself, he does the only possible thing. He projects it outward. He projects his lost soul onto a person, most often a woman, who seems to him to embody everything he has lost. She is no longer a person. She becomes a treasure map for him, the living promise of a return to his own soul. Understand well the deep nature of this desire. This burning, this obsession that you feel is not for the real person, with their flaws and qualities. It is a poignant nostalgia for the lost parts of yourself. It is your inner tenderness that you desire. It is your own vulnerability that you seek to embrace. It is your own capacity to feel life in all its richness that you covet. Lust then becomes the ardent desire, almost sacred in its intention, to reunite with this fragmented part of your being. It is the unconscious quest for your own totality. You are like a lonely king singing laments for his vanished queen, without realizing that he himself has locked her in the highest tower of his own castle. The desire for the other is just the echo of the desire to free what is already within you. This quest to rediscover a part of one's soul, although sacred in its intention, becomes an extremely perilous path when pursued in complete unconsciousness. Blindly surrendering to lust without understanding its deep origins is to open the door to inner forces that can literally dispossess you of yourself. Jungian psychology has a term for this: psychic possession. You are no longer simply a person feeling a strong desire. You are under the sway of a complex, a knot of repressed emotions, memories, and thoughts that has gained autonomy. This complex acts like a subpersonality with its own will and purpose, to feed itself again and again. You then have the impression that an external force dictates your actions. You observe yourself, like a powerless spectator, doing things your conscious self disapproves of, unable to resist the impulse. You are no longer the master of your own house. You have become the puppet of your own shadow. The concrete consequences of this possession are devastating, for this complex is an energy parasite. All your vital energy, which Jung called the libido, is sucked up and channeled towards a single point, the object of your obsession. The rest of your life withers. Your work, perhaps once a source of pride or interest, becomes an unbearable chore, a simple obstacle between you and your next fix. Your friendships fade, as you no longer have the presence of mind or energy for true connection. Conversations seem flat, your friends' joys distant. Your passions, your hobbies, everything that defined and nourished you is left by the wayside. Your life becomes a desert landscape whose sole and unique oasis is this person. The complex acts like a black hole, absorbing all the light of your existence and leaving nothing around but cold and darkness. Perhaps the most insidious danger is the way this obsession distorts and erodes your perception of yourself. You no longer recognize yourself. The image in the mirror reflects the face of a person you do not understand, governed by impulses you do not control. You act in contradiction with your own values, and each compulsive act digs the ditch of shame and self-alienation a little deeper. And the worst paradox is the feeling of emptiness that sets in, even after obtaining what you thought you desired. A reply to your message, a glance, a moment spent together. Instead of the hoped-for fullness, you feel a numbness, a dull disappointment. For the complex is never satisfied. The fix only calls for the next. You have worn the mask of the obsessed for so long that you are starting to forget the face underneath. On a spiritual and creative level, unconscious craving is a scorched earth policy. Creativity, like spirituality, requires presence, clarity, and a surplus of psychic energy to germinate. However, the complex of craving is their exact opposite. It generates incessant mental noise, a constant emotional fog, a perpetual restlessness. It consumes precisely the fuel you need to create, to meditate, to connect with your intuition. Trying to have a creative or spiritual life while being possessed by such a complex is like trying to grow a delicate garden in the middle of a hurricane. The storm of obsession uproots the young shoots, drowns the earth, and blocks the sunlight. It leaves behind nothing but a field of ruins, leaving you more exhausted, more confused, and more spiritually empty than before. Faced with this bleak picture, despair may surface. You might feel broken, powerless against these inner forces, but it is precisely here, at the lowest point, that the real work begins and that light has a chance to shine again. For this path of suffering is also a path of healing. The solution is not to fight against the craving with more willpower, which would only strengthen the complex. The solution is to radically change strategy. It is about asking one question, just one, but with absolute courage. What part of myself have I deactivated, rejected, or starved to get to this point? What is this wound that the craving is trying to soothe? The goal is no longer to seek pleasure to flee discomfort, but to cultivate presence to welcome that discomfort. You stop trying to kill the dragon. You sit down in front of it and ask it why it breathes fire. Concretely, this means learning to sit with the burning of the urge without immediately giving in. This is the most difficult and most transformative step. When the impulse rises, that frenzy to check your phone, to lose yourself in fantasies, to reach out to the other person, stop. Just for a moment, breathe, and turn your attention inward. Where do you feel this desire in your body? Is it a tension in the chest? A fire in the belly? An emptiness in the throat? Do not judge it. Don't analyze it. Simply observe it, like a scientist observes a natural phenomenon. You become a lighthouse in the middle of the storm. The wind of obsession may howl. The waves of compulsion may crash against you, but you remain there, solid, stable, illuminating the storm with your consciousness without being swept away by it. By observing the desire without feeding it, you accomplish an act of unheard-of power. You create space. Slowly, by refusing to add fuel to the fire of compulsion, the clamor begins to diminish. And in this nascent silence, the true messengers, those that the noise of lust covered, can finally be heard. They are often whispers at first, a wave of unexplained sadness, a poignant sting of loneliness, an archaic fear of not being good enough, of not being worthy of love. These emotions are the true message your soul was trying to send you. Lust was merely the noisy, distracting factor. It's as if the tide of obsession is finally receding, revealing on the sand the hidden wounds and treasures you could never see before. It is here that true healing, integration, takes place. By reconnecting with these fundamental emotions, by allowing yourself to feel the sadness without judging it, by comforting the part of you that feels alone, you actively begin to reclaim the lost pieces of your soul. You yourself nourish the parts you used to project onto others. This process transforms energy. You become an alchemist of your own psyche. The raw, chaotic, and destructive energy of lust is not annihilated. It is transmuted. You take the base lead of compulsive obsession and, through the fire of your conscious presence and compassion, you transform it into gold. This gold is a sacred life force, renewed creativity, sharpened intuition, and finally, the capacity to engage in authentic relationships, no longer to fill a void, but to share your fullness. So, you see it now. This lust that may have caused you so much suffering was not a curse. It was grace in disguise. The very fact that you feel things with such intensity is a sign that your soul is alive, that it refuses to settle for a superficial life, that it is fighting for your wholeness. This force, which others judge or fear, is in reality the testament to an immense capacity to feel, and therefore an immense capacity to heal, to create, and to love deeply. It was not a symptom to suppress. It was a messenger to listen to. It was not the poison. It was the treasure map that leads directly to the antidote. If this journey to the heart of yourself has resonated with you, then join this community of seekers by subscribing so you don't miss our next explorations. Your journey is important, and you are not alone in navigating it. To affirm this, and so that we can recognize each other, comment below with the phrase, "My desire is a guide." And if you think this message can light the way for someone else, share this video. Sometimes, a simple share can be the light a person needs in their darkness. The ultimate goal is never to destroy lust. It is to transmute it. Its raw energy, once understood and integrated, ceases to be a source of compulsion and emptiness, to become the very fuel for your creativity, your spiritual momentum, and your ability to build authentic relationships. Relationships that are no longer founded on the panicked need to fill a void, but on the serene joy of sharing from a place of inner fullness. So don't be afraid of your own depth anymore. The force that has led you this far is not a force of destruction. It is the force of life itself calling you, finally, to come home, within yourself.